I just watched a Virgo completely destroy someone's self-esteem in under 3 minutes. And the scariest part, they thought they were helping. They genuinely believed that pointing out every single flaw, every mistake, every imperfection was an act of love. Like they were doing this person a favor by showing them all the ways they weren't good enough. And that's when it hit me. Virgos aren't cruel on purpose. They're cruel by design. Their love language is criticism disguised as improvement. And if you've ever been in love with a Virgo, or you are one, you know exactly what I'm talking about. There's this darkness underneath all that service and dedication, this relentless perfectionism that turns love into a never-ending performance review. Because here's what nobody wants to admit about Virgos. They don't fall in love with who you are. They fall in love with who they think they can turn you into. And that's not love. That's a renovation project. So let me tell you what actually happens when you get involved with a Virgo. Not the helpful, organized, sweet version everyone talks about, the real version. The one they'll never tell you about because they don't even realize how toxic it is. First, let's talk about how they hook you. Because Virgos are incredible at the beginning, like unnaturally good at making you feel seen and understood. When a Virgo is interested in you, they pay attention, real attention. They notice what you order at coffee shops. They remember details from conversations you had weeks ago. They pick up on your moods before you've even processed them yourself. And it feels amazing. It feels like someone finally gets you. They'll do thoughtful things, fix something that's been bothering you, organize something you've been putting off, give you advice that's actually useful. And you'll think, wow, this person really cares about me. They're so considerate. But here's what's actually happening. They're gathering data. Every interaction is an assessment. Every conversation is them cataloging your weaknesses, your flaws, your areas for improvement. They're not falling in love with you. They're developing a comprehensive understanding of everything that's wrong with you so they can fix it later. And you don't see it coming because it feels like care. It feels like someone who's invested in your well-being. But investment isn't the same as acceptance. They're not accepting you as you are. They're investing in the version of you they're planning to create. Once you're in the relationship, once you're committed, that's when the real work begins. And by work, I mean their work on you. It starts small, little comments here and there. You know, if you did it this way, it would be more efficient. Have you thought about changing that habit? I noticed you always do this thing and it doesn't really serve you. And at first, you take it well, because they're right. They usually are right about the specific thing they're pointing out. And they frame it so nicely, with such genuine concern, that you think they're trying to help you become your best self. But then it doesn't stop. It never stops. There's always something else, something you could do better, be better, handle better. Your communication could be clearer. Your organization could be tighter. Your choices could be smarter. Your reactions could be more measured. And slowly, you start to realize you're not in a relationship. You're in a constant state of being corrected. Here's the thing about Virgos that makes this so insidious. They genuinely believe they're doing this out of love. In their mind, loving someone means helping them improve. If they didn't care, they wouldn't bother pointing out your flaws. The fact that they're invested enough to critique you, that's the love. But that's not how it lands on the receiving end. On the receiving end, it feels like you're never enough. Like no matter how much you improve, there's always another flaw to address, another area that needs work, another way you're falling short. And the really messed up part, you start to internalize their voice. You start critiquing yourself before they even get a chance. You're constantly scanning your own behavior, trying to anticipate what they'll point out next, trying to be perfect enough that they can't find anything wrong. And that's exhausting. That's soul-crushing. That's not love. Let's talk about Virgo's relationship with standards, because this is where their darkness really lives. Virgos have incredibly high standards for themselves, for others, for how things should be done. And in some contexts, that's admirable. It drives them to excellence, to quality, to doing things right. But in relationships, those standards become weapons. They have a very specific picture of how things should be, how partners should behave, how love should look, how conflict should be handled, how a home should be maintained, how time should be spent. And if you deviate from that picture, you're doing it wrong. Not different, not your own way, wrong. And they will let you know. Not aggressively, not through yelling or drama, but through this constant low-grade disappointment that seeps into everything. This subtle energy that says, I expected better from you. You'll clean the kitchen and they'll redo it because you didn't do it right. You'll make a plan and they'll point out all the flaws in it. You'll try to do something nice for them and they'll critique your execution because to them, this is helpful. They're showing you the correct way. But to you, it feels like nothing you do is good enough. Like you're constantly failing some test you didn't know you were taking. Like love has become a performance where you're always getting notes from the director. And the worst part? You can't even be mad about it because they're technically being helpful. They're technically right about the details. So if you get upset, you're the one being oversensitive. You're the one who can't handle constructive feedback. You're the problem, not them. That's the trap. They create an environment where you're constantly falling short, but if you call it out, you're the one being unreasonable. Now, let's talk about how Virgos handle emotions, because this is where they really struggle, and it affects everything else in the relationship. Virgos are earth signs, practical, grounded, logical. They trust what they can see, measure, and analyze. Emotions? Emotions are messy. They're unpredictable. They don't follow rules. They can't be controlled or improved through better systems. So Virgos do what they do with everything that makes them uncomfortable. They try to logic it away. They try to solve it. They try to turn feelings into problems that need fixing. You'll be upset about something and they'll immediately jump to solutions. Okay, here's what you need to do. Have you tried this? If you just change this one thing, you won't feel this way. And you'll want to scream because you don't need solutions. You need to be heard. You need empathy. You need someone to sit with you in the feeling without trying to make it go away. But Virgos can't do that. Sitting with uncomfortable emotions feels like failure to them. Like they're not being useful. Like they're letting you suffer when they could be helping. So they keep offering advice, keep trying to fix it, keep pushing you to just solve the problem instead of feeling your feelings about it. And meanwhile, their own emotions? Completely locked down, completely controlled. They'll tell you they're fine when they're clearly not fine. They'll intellectualize their feelings instead of actually feeling them. I'm experiencing some frustration instead of I'm angry. I'm somewhat disappointed instead of I'm hurt. Everything is filtered through this analytical lens that strips the emotion out of it, and you'll never actually know what they're feeling because they don't allow themselves to fully feel it either. Here's something specific that happens in relationships with Virgos that will make you question reality. They remember everything. Every mistake you've made, every time you fell short, every promise you didn't keep perfectly, their memory is frighteningly detailed, and they will bring it up. Not in the heat of an argument necessarily, but in this casual, matter-of-fact way that makes you feel like you're being presented with evidence. Well, you did this 3 months ago. Remember when you said that and then did the opposite? This is part of a pattern I've noticed. They're building a case. They're documenting your failures, and they genuinely think they're being objective. They're just stating facts. They're just pointing out patterns. They're just trying to help you see where you consistently fall short. But it doesn't feel objective. It feels like they're keeping score, like they're collecting ammunition, like you're being monitored and evaluated, and nothing is truly forgiven or forgotten. It's just filed away in their mental database to be referenced later when they need to make a point. And you can't argue with their memory because it's usually accurate. They really do remember exactly what you said and when you said it. So you're stuck defending yourself against your own past actions, trying to explain context they're not interested in hearing. Because to them, the facts are the facts. You did what you did, you said what you said, and now you need to account for it. Let's talk about Virgo's service orientation. Because everyone talks about how Virgos show love through acts of service, like it's this beautiful thing, and it can be. But it's also a trap. Virgos will do things for you. They'll help you with tasks, run errands, take care of practical matters, and it seems selfless. It seems like they're just being supportive and helpful. But there's an unspoken contract attached to that service. They're keeping track. They're noting what they're doing for you, and they expect reciprocation. Not in a direct, communicated way, but in an unstated, assumed way. And when you don't reciprocate in the exact way they expected, when you don't appreciate it in the exact way they needed, when you don't return the favor in the exact measure they provided, they get resentful. But they won't tell you they're resentful. They'll just get cold, withdrawn, passive-aggressive. They'll stop doing things for you. They'll make comments about how much they do and how little they receive. They'll sigh heavily when you ask for help. And you'll be confused because you didn't know there were strings attached. You thought they were doing these things because they wanted to, because they cared. But there were expectations, there were rules, and you broke them without even knowing they existed. This is how Virgos create debt in relationships. They give and give and give, but it's not actually freely given. It's an investment they expect returns on. And when you don't deliver those returns, you're ungrateful. You're taking advantage. You're not holding up your end of the bargain you never agreed to. Now let's talk about criticism, because this is where Virgo's darkness really shows itself. This is where the damage happens. Virgos are critics by nature. They see what's wrong before they see what's right. They spot errors, inefficiencies, areas for improvement. It's like a reflex. They can't turn it off. And in professional settings, this can be valuable. But in intimate relationships, it's poison. They will critique you constantly. The way you do things, the way you think, the way you communicate, your habits, your choices, your reactions. And they'll tell you they're just trying to help. They're just offering feedback. They're just pointing out things you might not have noticed. But there's a difference between occasional constructive feedback and constant criticism. And Virgos don't know where that line is. To them, there's no such thing as too much feedback. If something could be better, why wouldn't you want to know? But here's what they don't understand. Constant criticism, even when it's accurate, destroys people. It erodes confidence. It creates anxiety. It makes you second guess everything you do. It makes you feel fundamentally flawed. And when you try to tell a Virgo this, when you try to explain that their constant feedback is hurting you, they get defensive. They'll say, "You're too sensitive. You can't handle the truth. You don't want to improve. They're just trying to help, and you're making them the bad guy." They cannot see how their delivery is the problem. They cannot understand that being right about something doesn't give you license to constantly point it out. They cannot grasp that love requires acceptance, not just improvement plans. And over time, you'll start to believe what they're reflecting back to you. You'll start to see yourself through their critical lens. You'll internalize this idea that you're not quite good enough, that you need fixing, that you're a perpetual work in progress that's never progressing fast enough. That's the real damage Virgos do. They make you doubt your own worth. Let's talk about Virgo's need for control, because this is underlying everything else. All the criticism, all the standards, all the analysis. It's about control. Virgos are terrified of chaos, of things being messy or uncertain or out of order. They need to feel like they have a handle on things, like they can predict and manage and organize their environment. And in relationships, you become part of that environment they're trying to control. They're not trying to control you maliciously. They're trying to create order. They're trying to make things work smoothly. But the result is the same. You feel managed, not loved. They'll have opinions about how you should dress, what you should eat, how you should spend your time. They'll try to optimize your schedule, improve your routines, fix your habits. And they genuinely think they're being helpful.
They're just trying to make your life better, more efficient, more functional. But you're not a project. You're not a system that needs optimization. You're a human being who needs space to be imperfect, to make mistakes, to figure things out in your own way and your own time. And Virgos struggle with giving you that space. Because watching you do things differently than they would, watching you make choices they think are wrong, watching you be messy or inefficient or imperfect, that's deeply uncomfortable for them. It activates their anxiety. It makes them feel like things are out of control. So they step in. They correct, they guide, they manage. Not because they don't trust you, but because they don't trust uncertainty. And you, with your own way of doing things, represent uncertainty. Here's something that happens with Virgos that's particularly painful. They have a way of making you feel like you're a burden. They'll help you, but they'll make it clear it's an inconvenience. They'll sigh or make a comment about how busy they are or mention all the other things they need to do. They'll do the thing you asked for, but they'll do it with this martyred energy that makes you wish you'd never asked. Or they'll help you, and then later reference it. Well, I helped you with that thing, so remember when I did that for you? I spent all that time helping you and you start to feel like you owe them, like you're constantly in debt. Like asking for anything is taking from them. So you stop asking. You stop sharing your needs. You make yourself smaller and smaller because you don't want to be a burden. And they'll say they want you to ask for help. They'll say they want to support you, but their energy says something completely different. Their energy says, I'll help you, but I'll resent you for needing help.
That's the contradiction with Virgos. They pride themselves on being helpful, but they also judge people for needing help. They want to be needed, but they resent neediness. They offer service, but they track every moment they're in service. So you end up in this impossible position where you're supposed to need them, but not too much. Supposed to appreciate their help, but not expect it. Supposed to let them serve you, but also be completely self-sufficient. Let's talk about Virgo's relationship with vulnerability, because this is really at the core of why relationships with them are so difficult. Virgos cannot be vulnerable. Vulnerability means showing your messy parts, your weak parts, your imperfect parts. And Virgos spend their entire lives trying to hide those parts, trying to be competent, capable, together, trying to have it all figured out. So when you're vulnerable with them, when you share your fears or insecurities or struggles, they don't know how to receive it. They can't just hold space for it. They immediately try to fix it. Or worse, they judge it. They'll analyze why you feel the way you feel. They'll point out the logical flaws in your thinking. They'll suggest better ways you could have handled the situation. They'll try to problem solve your vulnerability away because sitting with it is too uncomfortable. And you'll never feel truly seen or accepted because they can't accept the messy, vulnerable parts of you when they can't even accept those parts in themselves. And their own vulnerability? Forget it. You'll never see it. They will die before they show you they're struggling, they're uncertain, they're scared. They'll keep it together, maintain control, handle everything alone, because admitting they need help, admitting they don't have it figured out, that would be failure. So you get this person who demands emotional honesty from you while refusing to be emotionally honest themselves, who wants you to be open and vulnerable while they stay completely closed off, who expects you to accept their help but would never admit they need yours. It's a one-way street, and it's lonely as hell. Now let's talk about what happens when Virgos feel like you're not meeting their standards, because this is where their dark side really comes out. When you consistently fall short of their expectations, when you can't or won't change in the ways they think you should, they start to detach. Not dramatically, not with big confrontations or emotional outbursts, but with this slow, cold withdrawal that's somehow worse than anger. They become critical of everything. Nothing you do is right. Every interaction becomes an opportunity to point out your flaws. They're constantly disappointed, constantly let down, constantly reminded of why you're not good enough. And they'll stay. They'll stay in the relationship far longer than they should because Virgos don't quit. They don't give up. They'll keep trying to fix you, keep hoping you'll change, keep investing in this idea of who you could be if you just listen to them. But they're miserable, and they make sure you know they're miserable. Through their size, their tone, their passive-aggressive comments, their obvious frustration, they create this atmosphere of perpetual disappointment that makes you feel like a constant failure. And when they finally do leave, when they finally accept that you're not going to become the person they tried to make you, they'll leave with a detailed list of everything that was wrong with you. Everything you did wrong, every way you failed, every reason the relationship didn't work. And they'll genuinely believe it was all your fault. They did everything they could. They tried so hard. They gave you so much feedback and support and guidance, and you just wouldn't change. You just wouldn't improve. You just wouldn't be better. They can't see that maybe the problem wasn't that you wouldn't change. Maybe the problem was that they needed you to change in the first place. Maybe the problem was that they never actually accepted you as you were. Let's talk about Virgo's martyrdom complex, because this is something they do that makes you feel crazy. Virgos will sacrifice themselves for you. They'll put your needs first, take care of everything, handle all the responsibilities, and they'll do it without being asked. They'll just take it on. And then they'll resent you for it. They'll resent you for not appreciating it enough, for not reciprocating in the exact way they needed, for not noticing all the sacrifices they're making. But here's the thing. You didn't ask them to sacrifice. You didn't ask them to take on all that responsibility. They chose it. They volunteered for it. But they're treating it like you forced them into it. They'll say things like, "I do everything around here. I'm the only one who cares. If I don't do it, it won't get done." And you'll feel guilty even though you've never asked them to do any of it. Even though you've offered to help and they've rejected your help because you wouldn't do it right anyway. They create this dynamic where they're the long-suffering helper and you're the helpless burden, where they're responsible and you're irresponsible, where they're doing all the work and you're coasting. And it's not true, but they've convinced themselves it is, because they don't value the things you contribute. They only value the things they do. They only see effort that looks like their kind of effort. So you could be contributing in all kinds of ways: emotional support, creative thinking, spontaneity, joy. But because it doesn't look like their practical, task-oriented service, it doesn't count. It's invisible to them. And that makes you feel worthless, like nothing you do matters, like you're always falling short no matter how much you give. Here's something about Virgos that's particularly damaging. They have a way of making everything feel conditional. Their love feels conditional on you improving. Their respect feels conditional on you meeting their standards. Their approval feels conditional on you doing things their way. Nothing feels freely given. Everything feels earned. And you can lose it at any moment if you mess up. This creates constant anxiety. You're always performing, always trying to be good enough, always afraid of disappointing them. You can't relax. You can't just be. Because being yourself isn't enough. You need to be the improved version of yourself they're trying to create. And that's exhausting. That's not what love is supposed to feel like. Love is supposed to feel like safety, like acceptance, like home. Not like a test you're constantly taking, hoping you'll pass. But Virgos can't offer unconditional love, not because they don't care, but because their entire worldview is built on conditions. Things are right or wrong, efficient or inefficient, good
or bad. There's a correct way to do things, and if you're not doing it the correct way, you're doing it wrong. There's no space in that worldview for acceptance without judgment, for loving someone exactly as they are, flaws and all. Because flaws aren't something to accept, they're something to fix. Let's talk about what Virgos fear most in relationships. Because understanding their fear is the only way to understand their behavior. Virgos are terrified of being seen as inadequate, as not good enough, as failing. Their entire identity is built on being capable, competent, useful. If they're not those things, what are they? So they overcompensate. They try to be perfect. They try to do everything right. They try to prove their worth through their actions, their service, their constant effort to improve themselves and everything around them. And in relationships, this manifests as needing you to be perfect too. Because if you're messy or flawed or imperfect, it reflects on them. Your failures become their failures. Your struggles become evidence that they're not good enough at helping you. They can't let you just be imperfect, because your imperfection triggers their deepest fear, that they're not enough, that they can't fix things, that they're failing. So they double down on criticism and control. They try harder to improve you. They become more rigid in their standards, not because they don't love you, but because they're terrified that your imperfection means they're not doing enough. It's tragic, really. They're destroying the relationship, trying to save it. They're pushing you away, trying to make you better. They're creating the very failure they're desperately trying to prevent. Now, let's talk about what it's like to actually be a Virgo in love. Because they're not villains. They're not intentionally cruel. They're just deeply, profoundly anxious. Being a Virgo in love means constantly seeing everything that could go wrong. Every flaw is a potential disaster. Every inefficiency is a ticking time bomb. Every mistake could lead to total collapse. So they try to prevent it. They try to manage it. They try to control enough variables that things will be okay, that they'll be okay, that the relationship will survive. But relationships aren't controllable. Love isn't something you can manage into perfection. People aren't projects you can complete. And the harder Virgos try to control everything, the more they destroy the very thing they're trying to protect. They want intimacy, but they're terrified of the vulnerability it requires. They want connection, but they can't let go of judgment. They want love, but they can't accept imperfection. And that internal conflict, that constant battle between their desire for closeness and their need for control, that's what creates the darkness. That's what makes them hurt people while genuinely believing they're helping. The really heartbreaking part is that underneath all that criticism and control and perfectionism, Virgos desperately want to be loved. They want to be accepted. They want to matter. But they can't believe they're worthy of love just as they are. They believe they need to earn it through service, through usefulness, through being perfect. So they try to earn it, and they project that same belief onto you. You need to earn their love too, through improvement, through meeting their standards, through becoming better. Neither of you gets to just be loved. Both of you are stuck in this performance where love is always conditional on being good enough. And nobody ever feels good enough. So here's what you need to know if you're in love with a Virgo, or if you are one trying to understand why your relationships keep failing. The darkness in Virgo isn't about being mean or calculating or intentionally hurtful. It's about being so terrified of imperfection that they can't allow space for humanity. It's about trying to control their way to safety while destroying connection in the process. And you cannot love them into changing this. You cannot be perfect enough to make them stop criticizing. You cannot prove your worth enough that they'll stop keeping score, because the problem isn't you. The problem is their relationship
with perfection itself. If you're with a Virgo who refuses to work on this, who won't acknowledge how their perfectionism hurts people, who insists they're just being helpful while you're drowning in criticism, you have to decide what you can live with. Can you live with never feeling good enough? Can you live with constant feedback on how to improve? Can you live with feeling like a project instead of a partner? Can you live with someone who offers service but withholds emotional intimacy? Because that's what you're signing up for if they won't do the work to change. And accepting that isn't love. It's self-abandonment. And if you're a Virgo watching this, feeling defensive or attacked, I need you to hear something. Your desire to help is genuine. Your care is real. Your intentions are good. Nobody's questioning that. But good intentions don't erase harmful impact. You can mean well and still hurt people. You can be trying to help and still damage someone's self-worth. You can love someone and still make them feel like they're never enough. And until you can sit with that truth, until you can acknowledge that your need for perfection is not the same as love, until you can learn to accept instead of improve, you're gonna keep repeating this pattern. You're gonna keep finding flawed humans and trying to fix them. You're gonna keep offering criticism disguised as care. You're gonna keep creating relationships built on conditions instead of acceptance. And you're gonna keep wondering why people eventually leave, or why you end up feeling alone even when you're with someone. The work you need to do isn't about lowering your standards. It's about learning that other people don't exist to meet your standards. It's about understanding that love isn't about creating perfect people. It's about accepting imperfect people. And that requires you to accept your own imperfection first, to admit you don't have it all figured out, to acknowledge that your way isn't the only way, to sit with the discomfort of things being messy and uncertain and out of your control. That's terrifying for a Virgo. I know. The whole foundation of your identity is built on being competent and capable and having it together. Admitting you're struggling, admitting you need help, admitting you're wrong, that feels like death. But it's not death. It's growth. It's what allows real intimacy. It's what makes love possible instead of just being a transaction based on service and improvement. Here's what happens when a Virgo actually does this work, when they actually confront their perfectionism and learn to accept instead of improve. They become extraordinary partners. Because all that attention to detail, all that desire to help, all that service orientation, when it's offered without judgment, when it's given without strings attached, when it comes from a place of acceptance instead of criticism, it's incredible. A Virgo who's done their work will notice your needs before you voice them, will show up consistently and reliably, will support your goals and help you achieve them, will be loyal and dedicated and committed, will bring order to your chaos without trying to eliminate the chaos entirely. They'll still see what could be improved, that's wired into them, but they'll have learned to hold their tongue, to choose their battles, to recognize that sometimes good enough is actually good enough, that sometimes people need acceptance more than they need advice. They'll have learned to offer help without keeping score, to give service because they want to, not because they expect something in return, to be useful without making you feel like a burden for needing their usefulness. They'll have learned to be vulnerable, to admit when they're struggling, to ask for help without shame, to let you see the imperfect parts of themselves they usually hide. And that vulnerability creates the safety for real intimacy. But getting there requires them to do something that goes against every instinct they have. They have to stop trying to be perfect. They have to embrace being messy. They have to allow uncertainty and imperfection and chaos without immediately trying to fix it. And most Virgos won't do that work because it's too uncomfortable, because it feels like giving up. because they're convinced that their way, the way of control and improvement and perfection, is the right way. So they stay stuck. They keep repeating the same patterns. They keep hurting people while insisting they're helping. They keep destroying intimacy in the name of improvement. And they wonder why they end up alone, why relationships always fail, why nobody appreciates everything they do, never quite understanding that what people needed wasn't their service, it was their acceptance. And that's the one thing they couldn't give. The tragedy of Virgo in love is that they have so much to offer. They're capable of such deep commitment, such thoughtful care, such dedicated partnership. But they're blocking themselves from experiencing real love because they can't let go of control long enough to let someone in. They're standing at the door of intimacy with a checklist, making sure you meet every requirement before they'll open it. And by the time you've met every requirement, you're too exhausted to walk through. You're too beaten down by criticism to want the prize anymore. And they're left standing there, confused about why nobody stayed, about why their effort wasn't enough, about why their help wasn't appreciated, never seeing that the problem wasn't the help they offered, it was the judgment that came with it. So if you love a Virgo or you are one, understand this. The dark side of Virgo in love isn't about being bad people. It's about being so committed to improvement that they forget about acceptance, so dedicated to service that they turn love into labor, so focused on perfection that they miss out on connection. And the only way out is through vulnerability, through admitting imperfection, through letting go of control, through accepting that love isn't earned through being good enough. It's given freely, flaws and all. That's what Virgos need to learn, and until they do, they'll keep creating relationships that look functional on the surface, but are hollow underneath. Relationships built on service and standards instead of intimacy and acceptance. And that's not love. That's a performance review. And nobody wants to spend their life being reviewed by someone who will never quite approve of them. That's the truth they'll never tell you about their heart. That underneath all that criticism and perfectionism and control, there's someone who's terrified of being unworthy. Someone who's trying to earn love because they don't believe they deserve it just as they are. And until they face that fear, until they heal that wound, they'll keep projecting it onto everyone who tries to love them, making you prove your worth because they're trying to prove their own worth. Criticizing you because they're criticizing themselves, trying to perfect you because they can't accept their own imperfection. That's the dark side of Virgo in love, and it's sadder than it is cruel because they're not trying to hurt anyone, they're just trying to survive in a world that feels chaotic and out of control. And the tools they're using to survive are the very things that keep them from truly living.